All right, guys. So the one thing that we do not have at all here in Los Angeles is autumn. We have like a fall season where basically we get like one gust of wind and it comes through and blows like a couple of leaves off the tree, and we're just like, sweater weather. Oh my gosh, drink our pumpkin spice lattes. It's fall. It's not very cold. It'll still be like 100 degrees here during our entire fall season. So it doesn't really feel like we have fall that much, and that is my favorite season of the year. So this year I'm doing Craft-tember. It's gonna be like my Craft-tober series that I had the year before last, where I was building something every day, and I did a build up to Halloween. So I made a bunch of spooky projects leading up to Halloween, and I posted a video like every 4 days or something. And I want to do that again, but I'm extending it out to be Craft-tember this entire bit from now in September all the way up to the end of Halloween. And this year I have a Harvest Festival theme, so I'm going to be building all these little things to go inside of the Harvest Festival, and then it'll come together at the end and be one little scene, like one diorama, sort of. They're gonna be separate pieces, but you'll see, it'll come together because they're all gonna, they're hopefully all gonna fit together. Now I'm doubting myself. If you want to follow along with that series, I am going to have links to everything I use down in the description box. These builds are all gonna be a lot smaller than like my large scale builds that I usually do on the channel. So for this video, I wanted to make a backdrop for the Harvest Festival. I thought we needed to like have some sort of a setting for all of the objects, and I just built some little storefronts out of foam and cardboard and some craft wood, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. The first thing that I needed were some guides that I'm going to be building everything on top of. So I created some building storefronts in Photoshop, and these got turned into a PDF, and if you're a patron on Patreon, I'll have these available for download for you guys, and the link to that will be in the description box. Next, I cut out the individual buildings and glued them down to some foam board that I got from the dollar store. This is going to be the main base for the entire backdrop. I used more foam board to cut out each individual building, and then I cut off only the spaces that were going to be used to create the bricks. I'm cutting out the windows, and then I'm peeling off the paper backing and the paper that I just glued down, and sticking this down to a surface so that when I use the roller I created, it doesn't go wiggling all over the place. This roller is made out of polymer clay that's wrapped around a wooden dowel, and I just used a stick to press in each individual brick and bake that in the oven. I played around with the bricks. I mixed some drywall and some glue together and then painted over it just to see what kind of texture I could get with this. And it was kind of a nice sealer to make sure that the foam didn't warp, but overall I don't think the texture improved too much. Next, I painted down a layer of red for the bricks and then did a white wash. I wanted the wash to be a little bit thinner and to go into the grooves, but I made it way too thick and that didn't happen. So then I dry brushed over everything with some brown paint to highlight the bricks and bring them back out. I made another roller trying to be a little bit more precise, and I used it on the second building. I peeled away the paper only in the area where I was going to use the brick, and then I left some for the part where I'm going to make the cornices. I glued down a little bit more foam on top, and then I drew the areas where I was going to cut out the foam to make the decorations for the cornices. I used my hot wire foam cutter, and I cut out the areas for the decorations. This foam cutter I actually realized wasn't broken. In my last video I talked about how the foam cutter was broken, but it's actually the wire power cable that's broken. So I ended up hooking it up to another power source, and that worked. I'm still a little upset that it came with a power supply that didn't work, but at the end of the day I'm still able to use it, so at least that's good, right? This is my drawer of scraps. So I have some scrap wood and some scrap, a little bit of everything in here. I'm looking for some tiny wooden strips to use for decorations for the front of the buildings. The cats have never seen me pull out this drawer before, so they were very intrigued. And Zuzu wanted to make sure that she claimed the drawer before anybody else. So here she is rubbing her head all over it. I'm gluing down the guides for the bottom half of the storefronts to some cardboard. And then I'm going to work on the windows. If there's one part of this build that I wish I would have done differently, or I guess I could have done better, I don't necessarily want to change it, but I feel like instead of just drawing in the interior of this building, I could have made it more three-dimensional. I either could have cut out these windows and built little boxes behind them and put in minis, or I could have printed out an image and then made it darker in Photoshop and glued it down. I feel like there are a lot of different ways I could have played around with this to just make it more realistic. But the one thing I will say is that this is just going to be in the background of the other builds, and since I'm pretty sure it's going to be blurred out anyway, it doesn't have to be super like hyper realistic. But the main thing with these Craft-tember videos is that they are supposed to be easy builds that are shorter, that I can get out quickly so that I can stay on target for putting out 2 or 3 videos every week for you guys. So at the end of the day, this is fine. I have to put my perfectionist away and just keep moving with the project. I glued down wooden pieces for decoration over top of the windows, and for the window plastic, I'm using these film sheets that are for printing out for projectors. And what I really like about them is you can glue them down with just white glue. So instead of using what I normally use, which is recycled plastic from food containers, I think for my windows, I'm going to be using this film from now on. Once I glued everything down, I went over the non-brick parts with acrylic paint. And since I glued down the wooden sticks before painting them, they were a little bit messy and some of the paint got onto the plastic parts of the windows. But I just cleaned those parts up with a Q-tip. I made some store signs that are very generic, and then I traced them onto the buildings, and I painted them in with acrylic paint. And then the last final detail was making the climbing ivy. I chose to do some fall colors for that. And I made the leaves the same way I made them in my witch's greenhouse a while back, but I changed one thing about it and it is so much better. I got this leaf punch off of Amazon. It's 1/35th scale, and it is so awesome. I can punch out like 1,000,000 leaves a minute versus when I individually cut out each leaf and it took me like, I don't know, hours and hours to do, and my hand was starting to cramp up. So I'm in love with this leaf punch, and I once again put the perfectionist in me away when I made these leaves because I wanted to place each one individually so that they all were going the same direction and it looked more realistic. But instead, I just dumped them all out onto the glue and shook them around. And I am happy enough with how it turned out to finish the build, which is good. This is the finished product. I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon, all of my patrons for making these builds possible, and a specific shout out to these patrons, my patron founders who were the first people to support me on Patreon, and my tier 3 Patreon subscribers. Thank you guys so much. You're awesome. I will see you in the next build, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video and want to see more from this series. All right, guys, I'll see you in a couple days. Bye-bye.